had all these pastors in Waco ready to remarry us, and none of it felt like the Lord. And we just threw out, well, what if we go to Vegas? And as soon as we said that, we felt the Holy Spirit enter the room. It was crazy.
We've never been to Vegas.
Never been to Vegas. Vegas has nothing to do with our story. But we were like, yes, let's go to Vegas. And so we went to Vegas. And so we actually flew her parents. And this is a beautiful story. We flew her parents out in Vegas, and he did the wedding ceremony. And that was a beautiful connection because I haven't talked to them in almost 2 years now. And so we met them in Vegas, and they were part of the ceremony, and we got remarried under the Welcome to Fabulous, the famous sign on the Strip. We got remarried under the Strip.
The traffic zooming by.
We got remarried right under the Strip. And Sydney, I always ask the Lord, say, Lord, why in the world did we go to Vegas? I had all these pastors in Waco ready. And here's what I said, and people might disagree with this, and that's okay, but I know what I heard the Lord say. He says, Jason, I want you to go to Vegas because I want your marriage to be a prophetic sign in the heart of where marriages get destroyed, right where the devil's playground is. Now, Vegas is beautiful. There's a lot of amazing Christians in Vegas, but he said, I want you to get on the Strip. And here's what he told me. So Sydney, if you can forgive me if this seems a little off, but he told me, he says, Jason, I want you to prophetically give the middle finger to the devil and let him know this is what happens if just one of my children will just believe on my word.
Most couples don't go into marriage thinking their relationship could end, but it's a very common issue in our culture and an even bigger reality. Hi, I'm Sydney Goldman, and I'm so glad you're joining me for the Glory Hour. It's all about, we talk about culturally relevant issues from a spiritual perspective. In today's episode, we are going in to talk about something that has probably affected you, someone in your family. We all know someone, or even personally, about marriage breakdown, separation, divorce, and reconciliation. And I'm really excited because in a moment, you're going to meet a Christian couple from Texas who supernaturally saw the hand of God move on their marriage. But before we get into that, I do want to share some statistics with you to shed light on the marital issues that are impacting our culture. Now listen to this. According to the census right now, there's 133.1 million people married in America. But sadly, there's currently 4.5 million adults separated from their spouse. And I want you to take a look at these statistics. It's the divorce rates in the United States. And this comes from the American Psychological Association. This is what they found. About 41% of first marriages will end in divorce. Second and third marriages have a divorce rate around 60%. And this was shocking to me. The average length of marriage before divorce is 8 years. Truly heartbreaking because, you know, when you think about that and you look at those statistics, you could say, that's me, I've been there, or maybe you feel like you're in the midst of it. We can all understand sometimes when these marriage breakdowns happen. But I want to take a look now at the reasons behind divorce. Let's take a look at this. So we have a full screen for you. So here's the top reasons: a lack of commitment, infidelity. It's actually 60% of people say this is the reason why they split. Domestic abuse, financial issues, communication problems, substance abuse, and mental health issues. Now, I know that it was just hit you with a lot of the reality of how marriages break down, but I also want to share some good news because this is something that's not being talked about in our culture and society. Did you know this? The divorce rate in America is actually declining. The CDC reports that more than 20 years ago, listen to this, there were 944,000 marital splits and annulments, and in 2022, it's about 673,000. So it's dropping, it's going down. There's a turn that is happening in our culture. And you know, when it comes to us as Christians, marital issues, separation, and divorce, you know, sometimes it's taboo to talk about. You know, there's a lot of generational trauma. There's generational curses, even in families. I can attest. I have seen my husband and I personally, we have our parents, grandparents, there's been a marriage breakdown. We've even seen our own marriage impacted and affected by certain things. And I think all marriages can say at some time and another, times get tough, it's really hard. You know, I remember a spiritual mentor of mine said that marriage is a flesh killer and marriage is really hard work. I know a lot of times I'm a millennial, Gen Z, we kind of idolize marriage, but the truth of the matter is if you talk to any married person, it's hard, y'all. Marriage is hard, right? But God created it. It is his covenant and his purpose will prevail in it. And so my heart for this episode is literally just to shed light, to be transparent, and to really speak to some of you who may be really affected by this. And so When I got contacted about this amazing couple you're just about to meet, who had this supernatural story of marriage restoration, I immediately said yes, because I know how powerful stories are. When you hear stories of reconciliation and restoration, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And so when you hear these stories, I know it gives you hope. I know that it inspires you. And no matter how dark it looks, no matter how bad it is so important that we keep our eyes on Jesus, we stand on his word and his covenant. And this is why I'm so glad to have Jason and Christine Carver join me today on the Glory Hour. They know what it's like to have a breakdown in your marriage, to go through separation, and even see the relationship end in divorce. Now, this Christian couple is amazing. They're on a mission bringing hope to other spouses by sharing their story of how God redeemed and restored their union. Jason and Christine, it is such an honor for you to be joining us on the Glory Hour.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Well,
Thank you, Sydney.
Yeah, you're welcome. The both of you, I'm just super excited for this conversation. And, before we get into, some of the darker things that happen in your marriage, and I know just the heart that you have to inspire couples that have had marriage breakdowns and separations, can we first hear about your love story, how the two of you met?
Well, it was pretty exciting. I was on pastoral staff. We live in Waco, Texas, and I was just on staff doing just a normal getting ready for our service. And then one Wednesday evening, this beautiful thing walked in the door because she just moved in she just came to Baylor. So tell me your experience.
Sure. I moved down here to Waco, Texas from Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, which was my home for a long time. And I moved down there and I needed some friends. So I drove past this church and I felt warm fuzzies. I thought, well, I guess I'll go there. I feel warm fuzzies. And I guess it was him, the Holy Spirit. So I went there to Wednesday night, walked in, met him, and we just hung out every day after that for a very, very long time. And then we got married about a year and a half later.
That's beautiful. I always love hearing people's love stories of how they came together, because it's amazing how God, unites us as one. And so tell us a little bit, so how many years, you're married, you have 2 children. Tell us a little bit about, starting your lives together.
Yeah. So when we got married, we were on, like I said, I was on pastoral staff. So we were serving in the church and newly married. And then a couple years later, we have our first daughter. And then a year and a half after that, we have our second daughter named Sydney as well. And so Abby and Sydney is who we have. And so, yeah, life started out great, just falling in love, just serving in our church and just building careers and just building a home. And it was beautiful. And God was in it. And I thought he was a very fairy tale connection. That was my opinion. Maybe she might have another one.
Well, I was almost 30 when we got married, and I had always prayed to God, God, let me not waste this time. Let me not waste this time of singleness, because yes, I want to meet somebody, but nothing ever worked out. I was like, well, so I traveled, I did all kinds of things. I moved, I did missionary training. I became a Christian radio station host and manager, got a broadcasting degree, got my master's. And so when I met him, I felt like I had really had a good time of knowing who I was, liking who I was, doing the things I love, finding my gifts from God. And I met this hunk of a man, and he was very dedicated and committed to serving the Lord. And it just felt like we were a good fit. I always had kind of pictured myself as a pastor's wife. And so we had similar dreams and goals, and just felt like we clicked, that we were meant to be from the very first week that we met.
Christine, just even hearing you share a little bit about yourself reminds me of myself. So I got married, I was 29, so I was close to my 30s, and I didn't, I think as women, you start hearing families oh, your clock is ticking, and just certain different things, but there is that desire to get married, and then, going to school and just with broadcast journalism, and I worked at news and just all these different things, but I had, even though my career was, really taking off, I had a desire to get married and met my husband, Jake. And so, I think even what you both are explaining, that a lot of us we know when we even think about our own marriages, right? That in the beginning, it's beautiful. You can feel the hand of God. And then it gets real. I remember I felt a whole shift the moment when we were married. I just knew something was different, the covenant and that bond. And then I realized we were dealing with some warfare that that I just don't think some people are really, you're just not prepared for it. It kind of catches you off guard. And so Can you just talk a little bit about, it's fairy tale, because I had the same experience, but then it gets hard. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you even walked through even early on, or you just started seeing some of these problems and things surface that the fairy tale just quickly dissipate and you're like, this is hard work.
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I love your background too. I feel like I can relate with that. And, so I felt like I was strong and capable. I could move to different states, cities, whenever I wanted to. And then suddenly married to somebody who had a very strong vision of what he should do and what I should do. And I didn't care for that so much. He was like, the very first argument I remember us having was we were still dating, and it was a Wednesday night, and I didn't want to go to church. I was working my master's. I was like, I'll just stay home tonight. And whoa, that created a firestorm, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? How is this? I appreciate church. I love God. But the fact that that became such an argument really blew me away because he was so adamant. And I just started kind of shutting down and not arguing about stuff so much because it was off the charts, in my opinion. I didn't understand why he didn't understand me, that I didn't have a bad heart about it. So I would say that's the kind of thing that continued. He's a tennis coach. People pay him for his teaching, for his coaching, for his opinion. And that's one of the things I fell in love with him. He was very smart, very high emotionally IQ, but I felt like I was getting shut down and I wasn't myself anymore because it would cause an argument if I didn't do what he thought was the right thing. Great motives, great intent, but I kind of lost, wait a minute, I can make decisions too. Mine were fine, but it didn't end up that way. It got where I kind of just got really depressed about it. So.
Yeah.
Just feeling
Yeah. And I know she described it so perfectly. And here I am, I'm thinking, oh, I've got the great idea. I feel like I know what the Lord wants for us. I feel like this is a good plan. And I just, through my zeal, through my ignorance, through my just like, well, you've probably heard the phrase, it's two become one, and then they fight to figure out which one they become, right? And so it was very much, I'm like, oh, well, you're just joining me into my world. And that very much what happened, because she moved to my city, she came into my friends. So our marriage, it was great, but it very, very quickly then got onto, this is Jason's world, this is Jason's community, this is Jason's friends, this is Jason's vision. And she came alongside of it. And throughout that time, she lost her voice. She felt and that opened doors for the enemy to come in and just wreak all kinds of chaos. But my failure was absolutely my inability to understand what my wife was really struggling with. Even though she told me time and time again, Jason, I don't like how you're talking to me. Jason, I don't think this is wrong. But I was just stubborn, and I just didn't see it that way. And to be honest, I really kind of discounted her emotions and what she wanted, because I'm like, well, I love God. This is godly. I'm not leading us into sin. Let's do it this way. And so if there was even kind of like a difference of opinion through, I took the lead, and she very much felt silence through it. So that cracked the door open to the major dysfunction.
Yeah, I just appreciate your transparency, because I think it's like we have to shed light on like the breakdowns that happen. And I know a lot of men and women, whether it's like the one spouse feels that way, it's like, you're not listening to me, you're not understanding. Even just talking about like, Jason, you had this whole other world, and she's stepping into it. She's like, I just don't feel like I belong here. And I think, when, as Christians, we take that the two become one, but you're two separate people, but then you have to make this whole new life together. And it's rough, and it's challenging, and it's hard. And there's moments you feel shut down, moments you feel like you can't communicate, and you just keep hitting these walls. And it can be really devastating and sad. And especially I feel like as Christians, because like we're Christians, we waited on God, we're doing it God's way. And why is everything like bombs going off? But it's so true. And so, both alluded to it. It's just like that there was a breakdown, and that doors were open. So can you share just a little more of like that further breakdown that happened in your marriage?
So I'll share from my perspective. So what the separation, so we, our story is we got separated. We did get divorced. It was, and so just how that happened for me, it was a complete shock. I had no idea we were at that stage. I knew Christine was struggling with some things, but I had no idea. We never talked about separation. We never really talked about divorce. None of that was on our radar. Was on my radar. Let me say that. But on a Sunday morning, on Mother's Day when I was walking out the door for church early morning. Christine stopped me and just said, Jason, why don't you give the kids a kiss before you go? Tell them you love them. And I was like, well, okay, that's not our normal, like, sure, I'd be happy to kiss the kids, but kiss the kids. And it was Mother's Day. I said, well, do we want to do Mother's Day gifts now? And she was like, yeah, let's do Mother's Day gifts now. So we opened Mother's Day gifts. I went to the early service, ready to see them in about an hour and a half. But that was the last time I saw Christine or the girls for over 30 days. That when I went to church, Christine said, I've got to make a change. And it was planned, and she could tell you more about that. But that day is when she decided, hey, this isn't working. I'm not in a good environment. Nothing's ever going to change. There's no other option now but to separate. And so that's what happened.
Yeah, I had started feeling so hopeless. I felt like for years and years, that he didn't care about what I was really thinking, that his vision was above, my feelings. And I'm a very sensitive person and have dealt with depression, anxiety. And so all of that really got stirred up, and I started self-medicating because I hated the arguments that we had. I started sleeping pills, and I would take them earlier in the evening, when he would get home, so that I didn't have to think about the conflict we were having. So I started myself on a pretty negative path there. That was not helping anything. And I just felt like things were hopeless, and he wasn't changing, and I couldn't figure out why I was so sad, except I thought it was from his actions. So even though we did marriage counseling, it still didn't, sometimes that would open up more wounds and we'd end up actually in a worse spot, just sometimes. But that Friday we had marriage counseling, it blew up, it was ugly, it was awful. And I had been talking to counselors, I'd been talking to, he never hurt me, but he was I felt like emotionally hurting me. His words I didn't like, and he just wouldn't stop sometimes. And so I told, over the history, he just didn't see it as an issue as I did. So I had people just jump in and say, hey, you need to leave. This sounds like abuse, you need to get out of there. So I took the kids and we went to a abuse center for kids, for families. And I would have never thought of anything like that, but I didn't want to put the burden of living with somebody else or asking somebody for money. And I thought, well, this is a way that I can do this. I can provide for us, me and the kids, until, God works out something in the long run. It's going to be sad, but I know that God will work out something after a while. And I didn't plan on divorce. I didn't even think about divorce. I was just trying to feel centered and like myself again, and then be able to think more clearly. So that's what I did. While I was there, the people encouraged me to get a divorce. So within a month of leaving, they had law help, and they're like, hey, we'll get you this, let's just fill out the paperwork. You won't have to pay anything. And so, man, that process, it took a while to finish, but it started quickly. And that had not been on my radar. So one thing we say is we always feel like, we have these issues, but then Satan took our issues and just blew on those embers and lit a bonfire. And it just wreaked havoc with us and our relationship. So I really started hardening my heart. I was like, I'm so tired of feeling hurt that I just need to kind of start fresh. And I love Jesus, but I started making some really poor decisions as well. So that kind of got confusing to me. I kind of got in this mix of people that were encouraging me to separate myself, but then to start a new life. Like a divorce care group was like, oh, God will have someone for you in the future. And there's great groups out there. But in my case, it was like, oh, okay, well, this is just an end, and then we'll have a new beginning eventually with somebody else down the road. So that's where I ended up for a while.
Wow.
What was interesting about that whole time, Sydney, and I know you shared this before, not to lead the interview, but you mentioned how many people encourage you to get restored and to even work on restoration?
Nobody.
Yeah.
I believe, I'm making a blanket statement, but as a woman, when I say, I don't like how my husband's treating me, you have so many social services, so many places to live, so many jobs that will open, so much, everything, so much help. And when that is needed, I am thrilled to death that is there. That is so important. But I got in this pathway of this, it was like a channel. Like I just kind of got fast-tracked on a divorce path, and being on my own and living in different places with the kids. And just being so supported, which is fantastic. But nobody, even any family members or anything, took a stop and said, wait, should we kind of talk through this a little bit? Is this really the best thing? Are we sure in the long run he won't ever change? Are we sure you'll never be comfortable with this? Are you sure? You know, so there was a lot of steps that got skipped once I left.
Wow. Wow. I really appreciate both your transparency, because this is real, y'all. Like, this is a story that I know a lot of us, like, if you've walked through it just going on that path and just thinking, okay, this is the end, I'm going to go over here. But like, I wanted to hear, Jason, even from your perspective inside, because I think something a lot of people don't talk about is the pain of separation, the spiritual turmoil that goes within, where it literally feels like death. It's overwhelming. So Jason, can you just even share from your experience? I mean, your wife and children just like left you. I mean, I even read and saw that like you put out like a search warrant, because I mean, it's like a search. You just like not a search warrant, so excuse me, but you were just like, you were like searching for your wife. You didn't know where she is. Like, it was, you had also like to go through a grieving process.
Absolutely. So the day she left, we didn't know. And when we reached out to, I reached out to our marriage counselor that we just saw Friday, and she just said, Jason, this isn't healthy. What's happened? I think we don't know where they are. I think we need to file a missing persons report. So that next day I was at the police station, standing in the police station, crying, saying, I don't know where my wife and children are. I need to file a missing persons. Her mom didn't know, because, she didn't communicate to anyone what was going on. And so that started this journey. But let me just say something that's so beautiful. Yes, there was grieving. Oh, absolutely. Yes, there was torment. Yes, there was pain. Yes, many times I cried myself to sleep at night. But I'm telling you, every time the presence of God rushed in, every single time. And the goodness of God, he is so amazing. So she mentioned the Friday that when our marriage counseling went sideways and she left Sunday. Well, I absolutely was like, that thing went sideways. Like, oh, I'm so disconnected. That Friday afternoon, I was driving on a back road with another pastor friend of mine, and I was just sharing with him what happened in our counseling session. And I heard the voice of the Lord so clear to me. And he says, Jason, you don't have enough hope for this next season of your life. You must have more hope for what's coming. And I remember telling my friend that, and I remember saying, the Lord just said, I don't have enough hope, that I got to have more hope. And so right then in the car, we just started praying, God, fill us with hope, because he needed hope for his marriage. And we just started, and we asked, Romans 15:13, we asked for the God of hope to come fill us up. And we just started in the car praying for hope. And I was like, God says, I don't have enough hope. I need more hope for the next season. Now, Sydney, I had no idea the next season would start in 2 days. Okay? I had no idea, but God did. And so he got me on a trajectory of just, I need you to come to me and encounter the God of hope. And I get asked a lot, Jason, what is in your opinion the biggest attack of marriages? And Christine alluded to it. I believe the number one attack, yes, the list that you mentioned is accurate. That is how it manifests. But I believe the underlying number one attack is hopelessness. They just lose hope. Why did Christine leave? She just lost hope. Why do people who were in my position stop standing and believing for restoration? Because they lose hope. And just hopelessness is being shot. And there's not a lot of people, even in the church, that speak hope into what we see as hopeless situations. But he is the God of hope. And so he just got me on a trajectory of just worshiping and trusting. The day that I got served divorce papers, that kind of broke the silence, I opened the papers and saw what they were. And I knew right then, God, you were bigger than this. And so luckily, the Lord just led me to walk into our bedroom, and I put the divorce papers on the ground. I turned on my Apple TV, and I just started singing, he's a good, good father. And I stood on the papers, and I just said, God, this situation sucks. This is not good, but you are good. And I'm not going to let the devil change my idea of who you are. You are good. You are powerful. You are strong. I don't know what's going on, but I know that you're good. And so that was the journey God just wooed me into, and he just took me on the process of the year and a half of believing, no, God, you're going to restore this. You're going to heal this. You're going to restore this. And it was a year and a half, almost 2-year process before the divorce was finalized. So we were believing, no divorce, no divorce. Throughout that process, Christine, what did you keep telling me?
Never.
Never.
You had your chance. You didn't treat me the way I wanted. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I left for a reason. Yeah. So he had the promise from God. He had the hope. He had the optimism. He had all that. And I know he's optimistic. I'd be like, I'm sorry, you're delusional. You're daydreaming. This is not okay. This will not be okay. I'm sorry you think it's you and God against me. It really felt like, I felt sometimes like, that's how it was. I'm like, I did leave for a reason, but that I had lost the hope, Yeah.
I heard, I mean, so the Taylor Swift song, "We're Never Ever Getting Back Together." That was the anthem that I heard from this beautiful woman for almost 2 years straight. Like, you are out of your mind. It's over. We had our chance. There's no way it can be better again. There's no way it can be healed. You don't know what you did wrong. I mean, you name it. I heard it. So the reason I'm mentioning that is that if there's someone watching this and they're hearing that from their spouse, they're telling me it's over, Jason. They're telling me they moved on. They're telling me they found someone else. They're telling me, no, I'm like, I know. And I know the pain that is. But, and here's the phrase that the Lord kind of has encouraged me to share. The Lord asked me, Jason, are you spirit led or spouse led? Are you going to let my spirit lead you through this season? Or are you going to let your spouse kind of lead when right now she's not wanting restoration? She's not wanting you back together. So don't be shocked if that's happening, because the enemy is real. There is a deceiver and there is spiritual warfare. You said it perfectly. There is a warfare over marriages. But oh my goodness, Cindy, greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world. And even if it's dead, another verse that God just hammered me with and just saying, Jason, I need you to know, was Romans chapter 4, verse 17. At the end of it talks about Abraham, about the promise. And at the end of that, verse 17, it says this: and God gives life to the dead and calls into existence the things that don't exist. And he was like, do you believe I am that God? That I will call things back from the dead and I'll call into existence? Because what the devil's going to do is going to put on display, look, this is dead. This is dead. And we're like, you're right. It is dead. But he brings it back from the dead. And so this is just who our God is. And so that's what we just love to point people to, the one who's so powerful and heals everything. So.
I love what you were sharing. And the one point that like landed in my spirit is when you were talking about, there's that list that I was reading and the hopelessness. That's why marriages end. That's why they break down and they fall apart. And so just even hearing how God spoke to you, Jason, and said, are you going to be spirit led or spouse led? Is just really powerful, because when it seems like it is over, it is hopeless, but God is like, I am the God of hope, and stepping in. And Christine, I'm curious about, hearing even how things started changing even in your heart to lead you back to your husband.
Yeah, it was sudden. It was not gradual over a period of 8 months or anything like that. It was very sudden. I was dating people. I just thought, well, okay, this time in life is really hard right now, but God has something better. You hear that so often, and I'm sure it's true that, when things end, God can have something better. He can redeem anything. But in my case, I was like, okay, well, this is over. I told him, I was like, why don't you move on? Quit being obsessed with me. Quit saying we're going to get remarried, because it got on my nerves so bad. And I'd be like, stop. I said, I just want you to get remarried with somebody who's really good to our girls, and not as pretty as me. She can be a little homely.
That's what she said. Jason, find someone new who's good with our girls, but just not as pretty as me.
Just a little homely in there. So, and towards the end that I moved home, we were able to become friends again, to a degree, because I didn't feel so much pressure. This is after the divorce. I didn't feel so much pressure, even though I knew he wanted me to come home. He always left that door open, and told me that was his hope and his faith, actually, that was going to happen. But once I didn't feel, how I felt a lot of times was judged and condemned for ruining our family, By then we had joint custody of the kids. They had to go back and forth. They were living full time with him because we had decided that was best. I was working. I would have had to put them in childcare. That wasn't ideal. So his dad lived with him. So the kids lived with him full time. Well, so there was no lead up to it, but we started talking a little more as friends, still argued about things. And the actual day I went home, we were arguing in the driveway about this guy that I was dating, I guess, and not a Christian. What was I thinking? Crazy. And God told me in church, I knew it without a shadow of a doubt that this guy had been cheating on me. So in my heart, I just shut that down. I was like, no, absolutely not. That's done. And talking with Jason, And he said, this guy's going to break your heart. You know, he's cheating on you. And God told him, I said, what did God tell you? I knew God spoke to him. It wasn't that, you know, I discounted everything he said. I was like, what did God tell you? Did God tell you something about him? He's like, yeah. He said, actually, he did say he was cheating. I was like, I am not surprised, you know? And he said, he is going to break your heart. And when he does, and I was just waiting for some sort of a snappy, sarcastic remark. And he said, when he does, I'll be right here waiting for you. And I just melted. I mean, even now I cry because it was so kind, so compassionate, so generous, and so deep loving that anybody I had met did not love me self-sacrificially. And I said, you know, we started talking. I explained why I thought I was supposed to leave, why I thought I was supposed to be dating this guy. And Jason said a couple things. And throughout the time we were separated, he would say things or send me sermons or whatever. And none of those hit me. I felt manipulated, you know, like he's just trying to get me back. But this time I really felt some genuine compassion that I hadn't recognized before. And he said, Chris, he said, no wonder you thought you were supposed to be dating this guy. No wonder you thought you were supposed to leave. So I really had all of these super strong impressions, visions, dreams that I thought were from God. And as we were talking, he said, Chris, would you take into consideration the fact, maybe, just maybe, that was not God that gave you those impressions? And I was like, I know it was, but okay. I suppose it's possible it was the enemy. And as soon as I said that, as soon as I thought that, it was like this huge door of light opened up in our living room. And I'm telling you, the Holy Spirit showed me so many ways I'd been deceived that whole time, that year and a half, almost 2 years. And I had the best intentions of following Jesus, but I got it wrong. I missed a lot of truth there. And so the fruit of my life ended up being a lot of crap. The fruit of his life ended up being a lot of righteousness and standing for our family. And so I said, you know, things kind of changed in my heart right then. And I said, could I move home just to be with the kids? You know, I was like, it's kind of rude, but that's really what I would like. And he's like, yeah, you can have a different room, whatever you want. And so I did. I started moving in that night. And within 4 days, like, God just knit my heart back with him. It felt like all these puzzle pieces that had just kind of clashed before were suddenly, God had molded and changed us where they fit together so well. And it was a really, really special time. It was a whirlwind. We just flew to Las Vegas and got remarried. It was a really, really special time.
That's awesome. Jason, just hearing that, what was that like for you? I mean, like what you were praying for, God answered.
Oh, he did it. He did it. We were praying and believing and standing and being told no, but I knew I had a word of the Lord. I knew, and let me just say it this way. It's not that I necessarily had a word of the Lord. Now, we believe in the prophetic. God did give me a word of knowledge about this other guy cheating on her even before this conversation. So I believe in the supernatural in the instant in that. But I didn't have a calling. We hear some people, how do I know I'm called to stand? How do I know I'm called? I didn't have a calling. The day Christine left, I just knew this. This is not God. This is the effect of sin and brokenness. And Jesus said, the reason the Son of Man appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. That's what the Bible says. I'm like, well, this is the work of the devil. Jesus, come and destroy this. And so I just grabbed a hold of it. And so I didn't have a quote unquote great promise. I felt like I knew who God was. And I know his plan is to restore. He's given me 2 Corinthians 5:18, the ministry of reconciliation, the scripture says. I mean, so I just stood that path. So yes, I was believing and believing and believing. And the day she came home, that day, it just broke. And it happened that quick that she did say, and something changed, and we had that conversation, and we mentioned about the Bible verses about, what it was, God really allowed me to be compassionate and understanding. I'm like, Chris, I'm not shocked you did hear things, that it was very convincing. And I was like, but there's a Bible verse that says, even if an angel of light comes and presents to you another gospel, then he'll be eternally damned, or that the angel masquerades as light. I'm like, I'm not shocked that there was a spiritual voices coming in you dressed in white and purity and holiness and protection. But is it possible that wasn't God? And he was able to communicate it. There wasn't shame. And that's when she said she prayed and the light came. And then boom, came home. And then that night, that was Sunday. So just to give you a super quick story, that Sunday she came home. that Sunday night, we decided to go to a hotel room that night with the kids, houses, because they were with me. So the house is a little crazy. And I was like, well, how about we just go to a hotel tonight? So this is the Sunday she came. Let's just go to a hotel and just kind of get oriented now as a family together. Well, so that night, kids are swimming, and guess what? Me and Christine are in the sauna doing a little smoochy. And I'm like, things are working in the right, like restoration's happening now. And so that was Sunday night. And so then Monday night is when we said, well, are we going to get remarried? And Chris was like, well, yeah, I guess so. I wasn't thinking about it. And so that Monday night, we're like, well, where do we get married? I had all these pastors in Waco ready to remarry us, and none of it felt like the Lord. And we just threw out, well, what if we go to Vegas? And as soon as we said that, we felt the Holy Spirit enter the room. It was crazy.
We've never been to Vegas.
We've never been to Vegas. Vegas has nothing to do with our story. But we're like, yes, let's go to Vegas. And so we went to Vegas. And so we actually flew her parents. And this is a beautiful story. We flew her parents out in Vegas, and he did the wedding ceremony. And that was a beautiful connection, because I haven't talked to them in almost 2 years now. And so we met them in Vegas, and they were part of the ceremony, and we got remarried under the Welcome to Fabulous, the famous sign on the Strip. We got remarried under the Strip.
The traffic zooming by.
We got remarried right under the Strip. And Sydney, I always ask the Lord, say, Lord, why in the world did we go to Vegas? I had all these pastors in Waco ready. And here's what I said, and people might disagree with this, and that's okay, but I know what I heard the Lord say. He said, Jason, I want you to go to Vegas because I want your marriage to be a prophetic sign in the heart of where marriages get destroyed, right where the devil's playground is. Now, Vegas is beautiful. There's a lot of amazing Christians in Vegas, but he said, I want you to get on the Strip. And here's what he told me. So, Sydney, if you can forgive me if this seems a little off, but he told me, he says, Jason, I want you to prophetically give the middle finger to the devil and let him know this is what happens if just one of my children will just believe on my word. I will work it all for good. And so we got remarried in Vegas, and we just said, God, let this be a sign. Devil, we're putting you on notice. Marriages that are destroyed are being healed, and Lord, use us. And so that was the start of everything we've done. And so we got remarried 4 days after she came home. I flew back Saturday night because I preached Sunday morning. So we flew, got remarried, flew back. It was a whirlwind wedding. And here we are 7, 8 years later, I forget how long, and happily married to this
so
beautiful woman.
Grateful to have our family together. Our girls now are junior and senior in high school. It's been a really, I'm so grateful. The woman in the Bible where Jesus says, she who's forgiven much loves much. And I've been forgiven so much. I have a lot of love.
So your story is so beautiful. And I love how God, you really were intentional of listening to the voice of the Lord, the both of you. And no matter what it looked like, it was like you allowed God's hand to just work and restore and redeem. And out of all the places, I love that he was like, go to Vegas. It's known as Sin City, right? And where there's so many breakdown of marriages. There's so many things that happen there. Like I have family in Vegas, and like I've been in Vegas and just being. I've been on the Strip recently, and like what a place to do that. There's cars going by. It's like it doesn't matter because God is a God of his word, a God of promises, and he restored and redeemed. And Jason, I even like how you said it's pretty much our marriage is a middle finger to the devil. I like that all the way. I love it. It's like there's this like woman I remember, she's like I used to like watch here at Cornerstone. She's like, give the devil a black eye. And that's literally what y'all did. It's like it was like a prophetic sign, like we don't care what's happened and what's going on. This is God over our marriage. And I just even think of the book of Hosea, with it, like with Gomer, and just going back and loving another time. There's something beautiful about that redemption. It's so beautiful. It's the picture of Jesus, right? Like the two of you are a representation of what Christ did for us, the forgiveness, the love that's unconditional, that's sacrificial. And it doesn't matter what goes down. It doesn't matter what happens. When you have that covenant bond and that love and you stand on the word of God, it is amazing the things that he can do. And I just wanted to share this statistic with the two of you and also with you that are viewing. I thought this was very interesting just to hear their story. In the culture of America is very rare. But just listening to this testimony, I wanted to plant a seed in you that if you're believing for restoration of your marriage, maybe it's divorce or things are happening, God is the God of does the impossible. And so this is actually the marriage reunion rates in the U.S. I found this. It's from Forbes Advisor. 6% of divorced couples remarry each other. 72% of reunited couples remained married. You know what I love? Y'all are part of that 6%. And you even now I hear God saying is like, we think of six, and just when it comes to numbers, like six is the number of man. But I even feel like what you were prophetically doing in Sin City, in Las Vegas, is you're making a declaration that our story is going to be used for the glory of God, our story of healing and redemption, so other people can know, because we're going to stop this divorce rate trend that's going on in our country, and it's declining, and we need to hear stories like the two of you, and it's awesome and amazing. And I'm just, my spirit is so stirred. I love the story, and even seeing the joy of the Lord on both of your faces, and how the both of you just the love exudes from you. It is truly amazing. And I just want to ask you both too, because as God has healed and restored and redeemed your marriage, you both are now on a mission through your ministry and things that you're doing, is helping to equip others who've been in the places that you've been. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing in this season to help other marriages that are struggling so they can be strong in God again?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So we started what is called Standing Supernaturally for Marriage Restoration. And we do believe it is a little bit of a niche, a little bit of a unique lane that we felt God told us to go down. There are some incredible marriage ministries, incredible marriage workshops and courses and books, incredible. We felt led, we want to minister to the one who was left, the one who their spouse is telling them it's over. And it does look hopeless. We felt God say, I want you to go and empower people. I want you to impart hope, and I want you to show them who I am, that nothing, Luke 1:37, nothing is impossible with me. Job 9:10, I performs wonders that we cannot even fathom, miracles that we can't count. And so our ministry is to minister to someone who they have been left. There is a separation. There is a divorce, but they still believe, no, this thing's not over. And I'm telling you here, Cindy, God is transforming marriages. And so that stat, 6%, I am telling you, that thing is changing. That thing is drastically increasing, because I believe it is God's plan. He is the God who restores the most broken situations. We're hearing story after story. In our book that we wrote, we have in our 40-day devotional, at the end of every day of that book, we have a testimony of a marriage that was restored. Because you said it, we need to hear stories like this. This isn't few and far between. God is doing this. And unfortunately, I think most churches and pastors, and I can say this because I am one, pastors don't know this. We do believe in the God who gives second chances. We believe it. We do believe God can actually touch something and bring someone new. And I'm not saying that's not what God does at times. But we've seen that story. And there's not enough pastors, there's not enough people of God, there's not enough churches that say, oh, I know it looks awful. Oh, I know this looks dead. Oh, I know what they're telling you, girl. But guess what? God can still resurrect dead things. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to impart that truth. And that's why we have the curriculum that we have, and all the stuff that we're doing to let people know God is the greatest, most powerful reconciler of the world. I mean, isn't our whole gospel, Sydney, let me ask you, isn't the whole gospel based on something being dead?
Right.
And getting resurrected again? That's our whole faith. I mean, that's what we believe. So why can't it happen between a marriage and a covenant? Because God said, this is the picture of me and the church. The marriage, that's what me and the church is. Ephesians 5:25. And so we're passionate. We love to help people. We love to see people. So that's our ministry that we've started. And we're seeing marriages restored. And it's so beautiful.
That's incredible. Christine, what are your thoughts?
You know what I love is being able to share my side with those that are standing. I think they are so strong. God has given them the grace to do that. And as the person who left and who got herself into some trouble, I was that little sheep kind of wandering around, falling into
You're
some ditches.
Pretty sheep.
A pretty sheep,
There
yeah.
you go.
Falling into some ditches. I feel like I can explain my thoughts and to the person who's standing and having faith for their marriage. And they say so many times, that's exactly what I hear. That's what I hear. That's what he said. That's what she did. That's what's going on. And somehow they're able to somehow humanize and have a little more compassion for their spouse who's probably being a jerk at that time. And they're finally able to get a little bit of a better grasp that maybe they're not just suddenly evil, that they're able to have a little more grace, a little more kindness, a little more understanding, and realize it doesn't matter what they tell me at this very moment, this very day, that can change. God can change that. And so they'll say, oh, he said this, he said that, he said this. I'm like, that's everything I said. I told him that for so long. And then one day, we call it the suddenly. So we have a lot of people looking forward to their suddenlies.
We don't believe you have to ignore the reality of your situation. We never say, put your head in the sand. No, everything's fine. No, it might.
They
It
might
might
hate
be-
you.
it
They
might-
might hate you.
They might hate
You know, I hated him.
Yeah.
God, that's what I had to repent of when I went home. God said, "You've hated your husband." I said, "Yeah,
Wow.
you're right." That's what I had to repent of.
And so we just want people to know, we understand this might be your situation. And it might be dead. And the love and the connection, it might not exist, no doubt. But that's why I want to say once again, Romans 4:17. But God brings life to the dead, and he calls into existence the things that don't exist. The very next verse says, and so hope against hope he believed. And so we read the story of how did Abraham live out the promises? How did he stand and believe? Why? Because I believe he never let go of the fact, no matter what happens, no matter what I'm seeing, God brings life to dead things, and he calls into existence the things that aren't there. So if you're in this situation, these aren't there, we get it. But oh, do I want you to get our God? He is stronger than any of this stuff. So that's what we love to share.
This has been such a wonderful and beautiful conversation. I am so thankful for the both of you. And you're watching the Glory Hour right now, and this is really resonating with you. You know, we have the website that you can, Standing Supernaturally, that you can go to, that you can connect with them. Also, we would love to hear from you. Maybe you are in a dire situation, in a broken situation. You can always reach out to the Glory Hour at ctvn.org. We are always here for you 24/7. And also, you can give us a call to the prayer line at 888-665-4483. Jason and Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your story, your heart, and all that you do for the kingdom of God.
Thanks so much, Sydney.
It's our pleasure.